Miriam. Sometimes you could say that these were the best of times and the worst of times. In the case of Miriam, the times to which you were born were unquestionably the worst of times. In fact, her name, Miriam, is a contraction of the phrase Mar Yam, the bitter sea. The Jews were drowning in a sea of bitterness. The Holocaust lasted 5 years. The enslavement in Egypt, at its hardest point, was 86 years. It's more than 2 generations. People were born and died in the worst possible oppression. Things reached a point where her father, Amram, who was the leader of the tribe of Levi, told his wife Yocheved, "We have to separate." Why? Why don't they have at least the consolation of each other in these times? So the reason is, to his perspective, bringing children into the world in Egypt at that time would be analogous to giving birth to a child in Auschwitz. Why bring a child into the world at a time like this? And there's some backing to this in halacha. During the time that Noah was on the ark, he and his wife did not engage in sexual intercourse because of the cataclysmic destruction of the entire world. It would be inappropriate. It would be wrong. So this is what Amram said. Things reached a point where it's wrong. We can't do this anymore. And they separated. Miriam, who was 5 years old at the time, so let's say she was precocious. Let's say a 5-year-old then was like a 10-year-old now, although lifespans were not that different by this point. Moshe lived to be 120 and was considered extraordinarily old. But let's hear what she said next. She approached Amram and she said, "You're worse than Paro. Paro's decrees that the boys be thrown into the Nile affect only the boys. Your decrees affect everyone." Now here, this should tell you something about Amram. He heard the wisdom of what Miriam said and went back to his wife. So let's think about Miriam. What does that tell you about her? It tells us that from the midst of her black-on-black childhood, where every day was only worse than the day before, she still saw something. She saw that there was hope and potential. Possibly this came from her experiences as being a helper of her mother, Yocheved. Yocheved was a midwife. Being a midwife in Egypt at that time was a horror. Half the children were doomed. Paro told her to kill the children. She, of course, wouldn't have any part of it. And she helped the women escape the surrender of the children. She said, "Oh, they just gave birth before I came." The women called Yocheved by a different name, Shifra, the one who makes beauty. What did she do? How did she make beauty at that point? The Midrash tells us that she would get people to make beautiful baby clothes. Beautiful baby clothes for children who may last a day, 2 days, 5 days, whatever. Miriam was known as Pua, which means the one who hums. She would sing to the children to calm them, even though tomorrow they may be thrown into the river. Why is that? So I'll tell you why. It's because Miriam understood the value of even a moment of life. Life is so precious that one day in the life of a doomed baby is an entire eternity. Okay, we have no way of evaluating what life really is. Every moment, every part of a moment, the soul has the opportunity to acknowledge God from this world's vantage point, to reach a point of wholeness and closeness that can never be achieved in the other worlds. We have to treasure life. The example of Miriam goes on further. Later, when the child who was born from this decision to reunify was Moshe, he's thrown into the river. Yocheved made him this little boat. Now, what could happen to a newborn infant, a 3-month-old infant, in a boat? He'll die of exposure, possibly drowning. What difference does it make? Why not just throw him in the river? It was because they believed in something else. They not only believed in the value of life, but they believed that anything could happen. Anything. To God, nothing is impossible. Things don't have to go your way, but it's always possible. There's always possibility. Where there's life, there's hope. Miriam stood there until she saw Moshe's rescue. She found Yocheved and presented Yocheved to Paro's daughter who rescued Moshe. And it was through that, through her presence, through her refusal to abandon Moshe, but to wait to see what happens next with optimism and faith, that Moshe not only was saved, but he became who he was, somebody who had a relationship to his heritage. So we have to be able to be bitter but not defeated, to see things as they are but not to give in. We could all do this. We're all from the same world that Miriam breathed her air. We're all Jews.